Well, I think the question is, what came next? What came after the Million Book Project? Well, the next big project at scale was Google Books, which started in 2004. Back in around 2010, Google estimated that there are 130 million books in print of all languages. And by 2017, Google had digitized about 25 million of them. Here to talk about this outsized project and this outsized goal is none other than Vint Cerf. You may know him as the father of the internet for his early work in ARPANET, but he is also the vice president and chief internet evangelist of Google, posing some of the biggest questions today in his talk, Desirable Properties of Digital Libraries. Please welcome Vint Cerf.
Thanks so much, Wendy. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you on talking about this particular challenge. I want to acknowledge Raj Reddy's pioneering efforts in this space, which continue to this day. Google has continued to scan books, primarily in relation to libraries that have made the books available for scanning, and also arrangements with publishers. Those books that are out of copyright are fully accessible. Those which are still in copyright have to be negotiated as to how much of the book is available. But the important thing is that they are discoverable. That is to say, those books that have been scanned are searchable, and full text is searchable, which means it's possible to discover what's in the books and might be relevant. OCLC and others have data about where books are in various libraries, so this assists the users in finding them if they don't have direct access. I'd like to speak, however, to some of the challenges that go along with the ones that Raj has already outlined. The most important one, honestly, is that the fact that something is digital does not give it immortality. And in fact, all of us have experienced exactly the opposite with various media that don't exist, or readers for which don't exist anymore. An example of this might be the 3.5-inch floppy or the 5.25-inch floppy, or for that matter, CD-ROMs. Laptops are being made without CD-ROM readers anymore. Then we have DVDs and Blu-ray, and who knows what comes next. There are external hard drives, which I thought would be a pretty strong solution to the problem of capturing and preserving information, until I realized that the physical connectors to those external hard drives might no longer be supported. If you've watched the way in which the USB interface has changed over time, and you've run around trying to find various and sundry adapters to make things continue to work. So preservation is going to be a challenge. And just copying into new media isn't enough either, because you need software in order to actually interpret and render or interact with digital content. And let's not get totally trapped only in the static representation of material, because an awful lot of digital content now requires software to interpret so you can interact with it, not simply to read it, but possibly to exercise it, for example, a spreadsheet. So we have a real preservation problem here. It could translate into requiring us to emulate old hardware to run old operating systems, to run old applications that will allow us to correctly interpret and interact with an older piece of digital content. So that's one area of major concern. The second thing, which I don't feel I fully have appreciated, is that the digital objects or digital books do not have the same properties, either under the law or technically, as a physical book does. With a physical book, I can resell it, for example. It's not clear how that works in the digital versions. I can throw it away, burn it up. Well, I could certainly throw a digital copy away. But I can do a variety of things, annotate, for example. The physical copy, sometimes annotation of a digital copy is harder. I can loan it to someone. It's not 100% clear how to loan a digital copy, especially under some regimes where those copies are under the control of a third party. So that's a huge set of issues. Raj has already pointed out some important problems about registration. I just want to emphasize that when we abandoned the requirement to register things that we wanted to protect with copyright, we lost an enormously important source of information. For example, who owns the copyright to something? What if it's been transferred? What if you want to find the person or party that owns the copyright for purposes of negotiating access to a work by simply saying copyright adheres or inheres in the person who produced the work, and you don't need to register it, you lose a great deal of important metadata about these works and to make them more useful, more discoverable, and in particular, able to negotiate access to these things. So it feels to me as if we have a lot of work to do. Just to add to that, there's another young guy named Frode Hegland, who is a protege of the late Douglas Engelbart. And he's been spending a lot of time building new tools for interacting with text. And I want to overemphasize, if I can, the extraordinary value of having text in digital form, which means all the power of computing suddenly becomes available for the purposes of consumption, production, and use of that textual material, to say nothing of allowing people to collaborate in the creation of that content, as we would do, for example, with Google Docs. Well, I could go on and on in this. I think the important message from my point of view is that there is a huge amount of room to improve the utility of digital works, and that it's time for us to put our heads together to find a way to create digital libraries and archives that are far more useful than what we have today. And I look forward to participating in that, as does Google.